Before Adam and Eve, there was Adam and Lilith. According to Hebrew myth, Lilith and not Eve was the first wife of the biblical Adam, the first man who ever existed. Adam was created by God himself using the dust of the earth, and Adam was given the duty of naming all the living things that God had created. However, by the time he had finished his monumental task, Adam had grown bored. God then took one of Adam's ribs and created Eve as a partner that would be with him for all of eternity. There's another version of the story in which Lilith is the first woman created for Adam. But this first woman turned out to be more troublesome than God had intended. And so he had to do away with Lilith and make a new woman for Adam. This reads like the first divorce in human history. In Hebrew myth, Adam and Lilith started quarreling immediately about their equality. Lilith refused to accept the role of Adam's helper, instead wishing to be his equal partner. She also frequently denied Adam's demands to lie beneath him, and this grew to be problematic for the only man on the planet. Lilith later fled the Garden of Eden by choice, and God had to send 3 angels to find her. When she was finally discovered, Lilith had taken up residence along the Red Sea and was allegedly copulating with demons. When God demanded she return to Adam and make him happy, she refused. God then punished her defiance by causing Lilith's demonic children to perish and cursing her for all of eternity. But according to the Zohar, a collection of stories from Jewish mysticism known as Kabbalah, that's not the entire story. There was a third woman in the picture, and her name was Naamah. The story of Naamah takes place during a vague and overlooked period in Adam's history. When Adam got rid of Lilith, he got together with Eve, and after they were kicked out of the garden, Eve gave birth to Cain and Abel. After Cain killed Abel, Adam decided he was done with Eve, and the pair separated. The Zohar says they were apart for 130 years. During that time, Lilith came back on the scene and captured Adam's affection. At the same time, Naamah showed up and also seduced Adam. The trouble was that both of these women were said to be demons. Adam wound up having an unknown number of demonic children with both of them, creatures some believe could be the mythical Nephilim. Naamah is also said to seduce men through their dreams, attaching herself to their deepest desires, and using them to birth more and more demons into the world. However, to trace Lilith back to her beginning, we need to visit Babylon and ancient Sumer. Her name is the biggest key to her past. Lilith comes from the Sumerian word Lilitu or Lily, which to the Sumerians translates into a female demon. The Lilitu was believed to live out in the wasteland of the desert and was particularly dangerous to pregnant women and babies. Thousands of years before the Hebrews started telling stories, and long before Genesis was ever written, desert demonesses were luring pregnant women to their deaths. They were also apparently feeding poison to newborn infants from their bosoms. Babylonians were so terrified that Lilith would come to kill their babies that they placed plaques outside their doors. One of these plaques was discovered in 1933 in Syria. It was written in the 7th or 8th century BC, and it said, "O you who fly in the dark, be off with you this instant, Lilith." It was believed that if Lilith saw her name written on a plaque, she would fear being recognized and be too nervous to go inside that house. Even though Lilith may sound like a terrifying demon who likes to eat children and ruin pregnancies, archaeologists say otherwise. They believe Lilith rose as an urban legend to explain the high rate of infant mortality thousands of years ago. To determine why so many babies died, the ancient Sumerians conceived the story of the Lilitu. According to the church, Adam and Eve were created as completely formed humans about 10,000 years ago. They had no biological ancestors and were snapped into existence at God's whim. However, not all religious believers think that's true. The issue with the Bible is that the passages are confusing and easy to interpret in a variety of ways. One of the interpretations of the story of Genesis is that Adam and Eve were not created by magic. Instead, Adam and Eve are meant to represent 200,000 years of evolution in Africa. Some Christian leaders, such as Billy Graham, say Adam and Eve were real people from history. Others, like the theologian Henri Blocher, say Genesis is telling the story of the planet and the evolution of humans through allegory. Not even popular church leaders can agree on what the story of Genesis is even saying. The whole tale of Genesis could just be genealogical science explained in a way that ancient Hebrews were comfortable with. It would be like a modern teacher trying to explain complex historical issues using memes. There is a final and extremely intriguing take on the story of Adam and Eve. One interpretation is that they were real historical people living about 6,000 years ago in the Near East. Humans had already spread across the planet. And so, God decided it was time to reveal himself. He came to a pair of farmers known only as Adam and Eve, and chose them as his spiritual representatives. If this theory is true, it would make Adam and Eve the first disciples of God, as well as the first missionaries, spreading the word of a grand creator across the globe. Samael is known as the Angel of Death, his name translating to Venom of God. It should come as no surprise that the most feared angel in religious history may have had a terrifying relationship with Lilith, the most despised woman of all time. Samael is an archangel, meaning one of the most powerful of all God's messengers. His main duty is to bring death to humanity wherever God sees fit. He's called the Accuser, the Destroyer, and was the one who brought death to the Israelites when they fled Egypt with Moses. Samael is also responsible for seducing humanity into committing acts of evil. He's supposed to test humanity's willpower to tempt those who would be drawn to sin. Once they are led astray, he then destroys them. The earliest mention of Lilith can be found in the Epic of Gilgamesh, dated to 2000 BC. It's the oldest epic poem in the world, a story about the mighty ruler Gilgamesh who slayed monsters on his search for eternal life. Gilgamesh was the original action star, the world's first literary hero. Some think he was even the inspiration for Hercules. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the hero encounters the Sumerian goddess Inanna, who was worshipped by the Sumerians as the overlord of love and war. She was minding her own business in her garden along the Euphrates River when suddenly she found herself besieged by a trio of villains. One of the villains was Lilith, who was the first wife of Adam. In typical hero fashion, Gilgamesh rushes in wearing heavy armor, slays the villains, and sends Lilith fleeing into the desert. Asmodeus is one of the princes of hell, an awful beast with 3 heads who spits fire and travels around on a dragon with the body of a lion. He's also supposedly the demon whom Lilith joins up with after she leaves Adam and the Garden of Eden. It's said in Jewish mythology that Lilith gives birth to 100 demons per day. The demon she's having all these babies with is Asmodeus. The whole point of their union is to spawn as many demons as possible to bring chaos into the world. In Christian mythology, Asmodeus is one of the fallen angels who joined Lucifer's rebellion against God. But in the Talmud, an ancient Jewish text, Asmodeus is depicted as the son of Adam and his third wife, Naamah. What's really interesting about this is we can see how all these different versions of various characters change depending on which ancient script we look at. Asmodeus is always associated with lust, but he has a variety of origins. In the Testament of Solomon, Asmodeus is responsible for driving husbands into fits of desire so that they cheat on their wives and spread chaos. Asmodeus is later depicted as one of the 7 lords of hell, responsible for the cardinal sin of lust. Lilith is not the only ancient demoness who terrorized people. She was the worst of the worst in Mesopotamia, but across the world in Japan there was a similar female demon named Yuki Onna, or the Snow Woman. She was believed to appear only in the winter months when it was snowing and cold. She would then prey on travelers who got lost in snowstorms, sucking out their human life force and freezing them solid. She was considered ageless, depicted as having cold white skin and lustrous black hair. Then there is the succubus, the female nightmare demon which visits her victims in the night and sits on their chest to crush them. These demons go back to ancient Arcadia and Summer, feared at the same time as the Lilitu demons. The succubus was unique in that it supposedly took on the form of a beautiful woman, only with bat wings or some other hideous animal attached to her back. And unlike Lilith, who tormented women and children, the succubus was more interested in tormenting men. The succubus would attach herself to men as they slept, draining them of their blood and energy, until they died while stuck in a horrifying nightmare they couldn't wake up from.